Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another influencer community episode of Meet the Right People. And you know what? You are going to be so glad you tuned in for this one because you're going to meet this fantastic person by the name of Jen Edds. And she's here with us today. Jen, welcome. I'm so happy you decided to come on and talk to us about podcasting.
Thank you for the invite because this is my favorite thing in the world to talk about.
That see already we know we've got you right where we need to have you. So yeah. So tell us the name of your business.
The name of my company is the Brassy Broadcasting Company, and I am the head broad in charge because you get to make up the fun titles when it's your company.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. But I seem to recall you also have a musical career, do you not?
I do. I
Okay.
have been a lifelong musician and graduated from Indiana State with a degree in music and business. And now it's kind of come full circle as I get to use a lot of that kind of musical performance and songwriting knowledge. Really, I get to weave that into the podcasting work that I do.
Yes, I've seen a couple of your songs recently on Facebook. I'm telling you, you have a career ahead of you. A national career is going to happen any day when people see those songs. Really. So,
Thank you. Thank you for that
ah,
vote of
very
confidence.
cute. Very cute.
If the podcasting thing doesn't work out, it's a good backup plan.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Well, so tell us, first of all, why you got interested in podcasting. I mean, it's kind of I mean, I know what podcasting is, but would I go for a career? No. So tell us why you got interested in a career in podcasting.
Okay. Because this didn't even exist back when I was in college trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I had a lovely job in a cube farm under fluorescent lights that was so fulfilling.
I could
And I
tell that it
say
was.
that, I did inside sales. I loved my clients. I loved the people that I worked with, but I knew that that was not what I was put on this earth to do. And I finally quit one day.
You
Had
mean
enough savings, quit, gave my notice, worked my 2 weeks, gave my notice to figure out what it was that I was put on this earth to do. Because I think this was probably like late 30s. No, might have been, no, it was early 40s. So you start thinking about your purpose and what you're supposed to be doing and what is really fulfilling from a work standpoint, because it's where we spend most of our time. And I quit. Like I said, I've always been a musician. I went back and took some audio production classes and knew that I was going to do something with writing music. I didn't know what that was going to be. And then a few months into it, well, probably longer than a few months, probably almost a year into it, a friend said, "Hey, I want to gift custom theme music to friends of mine that are nuns that do a podcast. Could you write it?" And I said yes, having no idea what that was going to sound like, but he was going to write me a check. So I was motivated. And he made the introduction, the podcast theme music worked out well. And then that led to them asking, "Hey, would you be interested in editing our podcast?" Now, I had listened to a couple of podcasts up to this point. So this was 2013. So podcasts were not nearly as easily available as they are now. Like you still had to hook up your iPod and download it from iTunes. And there was a lot more work involved with getting to the podcast. Um, but I said yes. And I feel like that was kind of that divine intervention and just being open to saying yes to a new opportunity that I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I knew I was confident enough that I could figure it out because I knew how to YouTube and Google. And that's half the battle right there. And I absolutely fell in love with podcasting. So I started my own podcast because I wanted that opportunity to talk to people from around the world that had all of these different experiences and just connect with people and hear their stories. And so that was the start of the Brassy Broadcast podcast. And then that led to other opportunities to edit podcasts for new clients. And then that kind of slowly has turned into the consulting piece of helping people basically get their podcast out of their head and out into the world.
I love that story. You know, I think so many people spend a great deal of their post college career working for someone else, which is
Mm-hmm.
what we're told to do,
Oh,
basically.
yeah.
We're not, I was never told to be an entrepreneur. I was told that I needed to be a school teacher and I needed to get my degree and my teaching credential and then go be a school teacher. That was the only path for me.
Yeah.
And so when you go and you do that and you realize, you know what, not really a great choice.
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't want to do this forever. Then you begin to truly, I think, it's almost like doing a master's degree or a doctoral work, is that you begin to research things for yourself, not for what somebody told you they thought you should be,
Mm-hmm.
or not what you were schooled to do, but you truly begin, soul searching, that soul researching to find out what would give you pleasure to do, that would make your life good, great.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happened.
Wow. So, okay, so you get the first paycheck and you go, not a bad gig.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get other clients though? I mean, how did that all happen?
Referrals, which is still the majority of my business comes from referrals, and getting in Facebook groups and just showing up and being helpful and answering questions. There's a phenomenal Facebook group called She Podcast. I think there are over 18,000 members now, and it's all women in podcasting. And so I was in that group, 4 or 5 years ago, and just the growth that I've seen them experience has been incredible. I just showed up and answered questions. That was it.
So being helpful,
Yeah, exactly.
and being an expert, knowing whatever those questions were, knowing correctly how to answer them,
Mhm.
and then referrals, people liking what they saw you do for somebody else, and then they hire you.
That has 100% been the key to my growth.
Wow, good for you. That's
Uh-huh.
awesome. So, why do you think that podcasting has become so important in the past, I don't know, 3 to 5 years?
There are a few factors that have come together. Number one, I mean, if you've got a smartphone, you've basically got a podcasting studio in your pocket. So it's gotten so much easier to record and create the content. And I tell clients all the time the best place that you can record your podcast is in your walk-in closet if you have one. That's the ideal podcast recording studio because you've got all of the clothes in there to absorb all of the sound and they sound great.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yes. The other key, again, let's go back to our smartphones. I mean, people can basically put you in their pocket now and take you anywhere, which is not something, especially in this past year, where we have not been able to get in front of people. I can still get in their head and in their ears because they can take me to the park when they go walk. They can put me on the treadmill with them. If they're driving across town, I can go with them. And they don't have to sit in front of their computer to watch a video or really it's a way to serve up content and give people options because I love videos, but I also know that I'm not necessarily going to sit and watch it. I love to read blogs, not necessarily going to sit there and read it, but if you give me the option of how I want to consume the content that you're going to share with me, you are my new best friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget how portable podcasting is now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I go back to the maybe the model 4 or 5 years ago where you had to download things and it was a bit of a hassle and you weren't even sure where quite to go look for podcasts, you know.
Exactly.
So
And
it
just
go ahead.
through the in all the places that they're available now. So in addition to Apple Podcast, there's Spotify, which is really interesting, I think, because Spotify has such a worldwide audience. I know in one of the podcasts I do, so I do a podcast about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with my coach because I couldn't find the podcast I wanted to hear when I started the sport. Um, and we get a lot of listeners from Spotify because that's where a lot of people are there anyway streaming music. So they're not going to have to leave a platform they're already using, and because it is so accessible worldwide,
Mhm,
it's really we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of downloads come from Spotify. And now there's Google Podcasts. Podcasts are available in Audible and Amazon Music.
mhm.
So there are new destinations coming up every day for podcasts. And I know some people will listen to podcasts through YouTube. They're not watching the video, but they're listening to the audio.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's I mean, that's the second largest search engine behind Google. So why wouldn't you want to be in there?
Right. Yeah. So let's say that you're an entrepreneur and you've been kind of tossing around the idea of adding podcasts to your entrepreneurial tool bag, right?
Hmm.
So how hard is it to get started?
It can be as hard as you want to make it. Well, and I say that because I'm a straight up DIY kind of girl. Like I said, if I've got Google and YouTube, I'm probably going to be able to figure out a good chunk of it. So it's you can do all the research yourself. The information is out there. The other piece though is that there's so much information. It's so easy to get overwhelmed
Mhm,
that you can call someone like me, or I can always recommend you to one of my other podcasting colleagues to get you set up to make sure that you start out on the right foot with it.
mhm,
Because there are certain things that, like, number one is what do you want to get out of your podcast and how can you get the most out of it? Because podcasting really is a long game. And what happens is people, if they're not seeing big download numbers right off the bat and they're not Brene Brown, then they get frustrated and they
mhm,
just quit.
mhm,
So getting from that first episode to the second episode, there's a considerable drop. And then there's another drop, maybe 7 to 10 episodes into it where they've committed, but they're still not seeing that growth. And for me, there's a couple ways that you can look at it. Um, I personally, for my own podcast, I view it as a resource library, and especially in the direction that I'm heading with it this year, is I want to make it a because think about how many times you answer the same question, like 50 times. Every time somebody wants to pick your brain and take you to get coffee, what if you could save them the cost of the coffee and just send them the episode? Here, I answer this question directly. This is where you want to start. And then come back to me and we'll have a better conversation.
mhm,
You're going to be better off. They're going to be better off. If you've got multiple episodes in there, maybe around kind of the same topic, they can binge that and then really come back to you and have a better conversation. And you're already going to be that voice in their head because you've established the relationship with them. Not even have necessarily, you've never met them, but
mhm,
you've established a relationship.
mhm,
And I really think that's one of kind of the superpowers of podcasting.
mhm. So your the way you help podcast wannabes
Mm-hmm.
is that you can just like talk to them about it, kind of give
Mm-hmm.
them an overview, But I also heard you say a while ago that you can do podcast editing. Um, I guess you would do like some research, like what their best platform is going to be, for the genre that they're going to present.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really a big part of your business too, not just you being a podcaster,
Right.
but being able to help other podcasters who maybe aren't the technical types to edit and how to
Right.
post it and all that kind of stuff.
I was actually talking to a client yesterday here in Indianapolis because we're going to interview each other, and then I'm going to have it for my podcast and she's going to have it for her podcast, and hopefully we're going to get some cross promotion that way because we have kind of similar audiences. And she was talking about when she initially hired me. She said, you went out and you told me exactly what gear I needed to order. She said, and I'm pretty smart, right? So she got the gear and she was all excited and she opened up the box and pulled out the manual and started to read it. And she said it was all in audio, like technical audio language. She said, I don't speak that language. I might as well have been reading Chinese or some other language because I had no idea what they were talking about. And she said, she kind of fussed with it for a while and then folded it, put it all back in the box, put it on the shelf, and just walked away.
Wow.
And then she called me and said, let's do this. And what I found, so one of my basic philosophies is more cables equals more problems. So I try to keep it as basic as I can and really try to meet people where they are. Some people are going to get it right off the bat. Some people, I'm like, this is a USB and this is where you plug it in and this is where you turn your microphone on. And that's fine. I love that because once they get it, like the light bulbs go on and then they're like, I recorded my episode, and just the excitement because they're learning an entirely new skill.
Right.
And just having the ability to take what can be sometimes very technical and scary and simplifying that's it's like, oh, that's what people pay me to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's important for each entrepreneur to know what their wheelhouse is.
Mm-hmm.
People will often say, make sure you swim in your own lane. And
Yeah.
I don't want to swim in a lane that is filled with cables, you know, uh,
Right.
because I drowned. That's not my field of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So um, why not take advantage of people who have that expertise and
Mm-hmm.
give that piece of it to them, like you do that, and then I'll create the content of the
Well, and
podcast.
that's actually how I ended up getting my first podcast editing job, because the music started the conversation, but then they were like, it might take 4 or 5 hours to edit an episode. That's not the best use of our time. So can we just pay you to do it? Yes, gladly.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like this big relief when you realize that there is someone that can help you
Right.
and save you time
Mm-hmm.
and get the end product the way you want it to be in the first place.
Right. It's going to sound great.
And isn't that what we want? I mean, we want to be as professional as we possibly can
Mm-hmm.
and to look our best and to sound our best and all those kinds of things. So
Right.
yeah, it makes total sense to me. Um, so, okay, how about let's talk about podcast content. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so, okay, I know what my content would be. Like, I love to cook, so my content would all be around recipes and cooking and easy hacks and what to do if you don't have cream cheese in your house. How can you substitute? Right? It would be all of that kind of stuff, and I could probably talk about that forever. But here's the next question, Jen: who wants to listen to that? How do I know there's even an audience out there for me?
There's an audience for everything. I mean,
Oh,
honestly,
good.
well, like I said earlier, I do a podcast about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu with my coach because one of our goals with the podcast is to bring more women to the sport and to foster community within the sport. And it's been incredible. We've gotten direct messages from, we got one a couple weeks ago from a woman that listens in Germany. And
Wow.
she had a question. And we've gotten questions just, just maybe something that they weren't comfortable asking a coach or a teammate. We'll get a question on, or we'll get suggestions for topics and things like that. I mean, your audience will gladly tell you what kind of content they want to hear.
So it's really kind of driven, you pick out a podcast topic and you do some podcasts, maybe you do, let's say 5, and then you start getting your audience base, and they're kind of leading you or helping you, like what the future podcast topics could or should be.
Absolutely, 100%. I look at a podcast, at least for how I like to use it, as the start of a conversation.
Mhm.
And then I feel like you're kind of volleying this idea out to the listener, and then you ask them for feedback on it. What has their experience been in a similar situation? How would they have responded to something? How have they, handled something similar? It's just really an opportunity to start dialogue.
Mhm.
So we encourage our listeners connect with us on Instagram. That's typically where we're hanging out, and that's where we seem to get the most interaction for direct messages. Occasionally we'll get some in our Facebook group, but we get a lot on Instagram, and with people sharing episodes and then tagging us in them. And we love to give them shout outs within the podcast. If somebody takes the time to share the episode and mention something that they got out of it, we want to give them a shout out and acknowledge that because we appreciate it.
Right. And that's just helping grow your audience base.
Mm-hmm.
Because if
100%.
I'm listening to you and I hear that you're shouting me out, well, now I'm even more encouraged. Like I want to listen to you more. And perhaps I want to engage you if I'm in that same sport. Like, maybe could I be a guest on your podcast as an
Right.
example, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
The
I
other
just,
thing,
yeah.
from when you're kind of figuring out what content to start with, I tell so many of my clients, because they're typically industry professionals, start with your list of FAQs. What question are you answering 500 times a week? Start with that one. Because it's going to save you having to answer it 500 times when you can send somebody the link. And people have already told you what their biggest questions are. You already know. You might not have listed it out, but sit down with a pen and paper, make that list of the top 10. There's your first 10 episodes.
Yeah. And should you plan out like 5 to 10 episodes in advance? I mean, do you always kind of want to have the next 5 in your pocket?
I think the more, it really depends on the type of show that you're doing. You can't do that as much with something that's more current events based.
Mhm.
But if you're doing something that is, professional services related or something like that, you could
Mhm.
absolutely plan your entire year. If you're going to do a podcast every week, sit down and write out your 52 episode ideas.
Mhm. About 2 years ago, I met a woman who lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana, so
Mhm.
just kind of up the road from you. And she is a blogger. So that's her claim to fame, and she's a very good blogger. And she said that she plans out a content calendar for her blogs for a whole year in advance.
Mhm.
Now she says, if something comes up, she can definitely slot something out and slot something in if it's like a current event or something that is just too good to pass up.
Oh, sure.
But she said, rather than sitting at my computer going, what am I going to type today? What topic should I be typing? She said, I just look at my content calendar, and if it's Tuesday, February 15th, then it needs to be what I've written down.
Mm-hmm.
So I always appreciated that. I thought, sometimes we do struggle for fresh content or fresh topics or, our slant on something. Whereas if you have like a master list, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you you could do some research in advance, but it's just right there waiting for you. It's not like you have to reinvent the wheel every week.
Right. I love having a calendar and having it planned out because then I feel like I've got my roadmap and I know exactly
Mhm.
what I need to do when I sit down.
Right, absolutely. Well, so Jen, if our listeners and our viewers want to have a conversation with you about, they think, what, I want to do a podcast, but I need more information. Can they just call you? I mean, would you be willing to talk to people about it?
Absolutely. Actually, if you go to my website, it's brassybroad.com. I've got a little button there and you can schedule a 20-minute call with me because I probably talk as many people out of starting podcasts as I do starting podcast, which is a horrible business model. Don't do that. But I sleep better at night because I know I've seen the struggle. And I don't want you to get, 6 weeks into this and thinking, why did I buy this microphone and this stuff? And this is horrible and I hate it. Nobody wants that.
Well, and also maybe podcasting isn't right for you right now.
Right. The other thing to keep in mind is you don't need a podcast of your own to leverage the power of podcasting. Go be a guest.
Oh, let's talk about that. Okay,
Okay.
so be a guest.
Hmm.
So if I want to be a guest on a podcast, what should I do? Should I call them? Should I text? How do you do that?
What the first thing that I would do is make a list of podcasts, and especially if you haven't maybe listened to a lot of podcasts, just do a Google search on a topic and, you know, bazillions will pop up and start listening to get familiar with that show and what that host talks about and what unique points you can bring to the conversation that they're already having.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then do you just do you just reach out to these people or do you?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's just an email, find out, who the host is. A lot of times they most hosts I know encourage you to email them or connect with them on social media.
Mhm.
What I would do probably even before I reached out to them. So you've listened to an episode or two, you've become a fan of the show, connect with them on social media. Start the conversation there. So it's already you're already on their radar. Share their stuff. Comment on their post. It's so much easier once you've already kind of established that you're a fan of the show because I get horrible, horrible pitches, usually through LinkedIn. You should have so and so on that maybe they've hired a PR firm or a company that books people on podcast. So and so would add so much value to your audience. You've never listened to one of my episodes. You do. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious. So those typically don't even get a response. If you can personalize the pitch and say, hey, you said this in episode 59, and that really resonated with me. And
Mhm.
this is something that I talk about or I work with my clients, and this is how I approach it. Would it be helpful if I came on your show and we talked about that? If you just tailor the pitch, like it is, cold emails with anything or cold phone calls typically are not very well thought out.
Right. And not responded to very often as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a personal story about that. So I have been following Gretchen Rubin, and she's written several books now, but I
Hmm.
think The Happiness Project was her
Yeah.
first book. And I just fell in love with her writing, and I probably own every book that she's ever written. And so I did exactly what you said. I started following her on social media. I started commenting about her posts. And she and her sister have a podcast now. I've had
Hmm.
it for a while. And I listen to a lot of their podcasts. And so I've noticed that every once in a while, she will comment back to me on a post, on one of her posts that I've commented on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, you know what, Gretchen Rubin knows my name.
Right. Isn't that incredible?
I think so.
It is. I mean, there's so much horrible, awful things that we get from social media, but there are really great connections and relationships that can be built there too.
Right. And I kind of feel that way about it. I've been thinking about, and this may be one of the goals for 2021 for me, is to reach out for her to her. And, you know, from time to time, they do have special guests on their podcast. It's not just she and her sister. And I thought, I just got to figure out a niche that's going to kind of fit in between
Right.
those two, you know, and do the, you know, the soft introduction pitch. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Wow, that'd be like the highlight, wouldn't it? I'm on a podcast with
Right.
Gretchen Rubin. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be fun.
and I think that's why it's so valuable to listen to a podcast and get at least, 4 or 5 episodes into it and see what is that value you could actually bring and that unique lens and experience that you can offer that maybe they haven't hit on yet.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great way to approach it. And also kind of gives us like a bird's eye view maybe of what it takes to be a podcaster for over a span of time, not just for
Right.
like 6 episodes and then you're done. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Now I happen to know that you are going to be doing a question and answer thing in January, aren't you?
It is. I'm going to do a virtual workshop on how to get booked as a podcast guest
Oh,
because
wow. Oh,
that was
okay.
the number one question that I was asked this year. It wasn't so much how do I start a podcast because that can be very overwhelming and that's a little scary and that's a commitment. But how can I be on more guests or be a guest on more shows to expand my reach? That's a lot easier thing to do. So
So
January
you're
21st,
in the 21st.
I can
Okay.
send you the link. It's available. You can get tickets through Eventbrite, and
Okay.
I'm going to hold it on Zoom,
Okay.
and I will walk you through how to research. So, how to find podcasts, and then how to pitch yourself, how to show up to be that guest that just knocks their socks off so that they'll refer you then to their other podcasting buddies,
Hmm.
and then how to really leverage that podcast appearance once you've done it.
Hmm. Great. So if we've got folks that are interested in that, they can just go to Eventbrite. And what's the name of the workshop?
It is, that's a great question. It's hold on. I'm gonna tell you.
Okay.
I cannot believe.
Because my experience with Eventbrite is unless I have the right title of something.
That's true. And usually if you just put Jen Eads, EDDS, Indianapolis, it
Okay.
should come up with that.
Okay.
And let's see. Becoming the ideal podcast guest, how to pitch, prepare, and prosper.
Oh, okay. That's a long one. So,
It
okay.
is.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. So we can kind of refer people over to you that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then people can go check you out on your website. And there's a little button there that if they want to talk to you, they can do like a boom, a little 20-minute conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
What else? How else can they reach you? Or how do we find your podcasts?
Well, it's available in all of your favorite podcasting apps. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Audible, and Amazon Music, Stitcher, Radio Public. It's in all the places.
It's
It's
on
on
all.
YouTube too. I actually have a YouTube channel where I do a lot of podcasting tutorials. So if you're looking for
Oh,
that and maybe just kind of what microphone do I need? What kind of gear? How do I record this thing? It's my YouTube channel is Brassy Broad Jen.
okay. Brassy Broad Jen, that's your YouTube channel. So we could kind of go there. We know how to book an appointment with you. If we want to do the webinar with you in January, you know how to do that. So, wow, okay. This is exciting. I get excited about new things,
I do too.
and I think that this is the right time of the year. You know how we always say in January, you got to set your goals and all those things. And I believe in that to boot. But if you're really looking to add something new, to your entrepreneurial toolkit, I really think that considering podcasting or being a guest on podcasts can lead you kind of to that next level in your business.
100%.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Jen, you know what? I could just talk to you all day.
This is so much fun.
I know this is so much fun. And I just appreciate you so much for agreeing to talk to our community, the influencer community, and be one of those people that we call this is the right person. This is the person you need to know. This is the person you need to meet. So thank you again for your generosity and kindness on talking to us today. And we'll be looking for you in podcasts as we move forward into 2021.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Talk to you soon.